And as we drove down the congested Nairobi streets, I would gaze upon the street art and the graffiti that would decorate and accessorize the walls of the city. Now, these are the earliest memories I have of street art, and although at the time I wasn't able to fully understand what it was I was seeing, it was the colors and the expressions that drew me in. Now, this was back in 2010. However, 10 years later, nothing has changed. I still drive down the same streets with the same mesmerizing pieces beautifying these walls while choking on dirty Nairobi air. And although the air quality in Nairobi has become kidogo toxic and our love for gengetune music has become just a bit concerning, our creative arts sector has seen amazing booms. As a matter of fact, in the year 2013, the creative arts sector brought in $40.9 million US. This was due to the establishment of various arts institutions that were set up across the country, such as Sarakasi Dance Studio and Power 254. And in addition to this, we currently have a GDP of over $74.94 billion US, and we have seen a steadily increasing economy. We've seen the construction of roads and the improvement of public transport services, such as the SGR, which has connected our country now more than ever before. And best of all, we have seen the filling in of potholes that were previously the size of entire roads. And although these are all improvements that have been taken to facilitate the growth of our country, the ways in which we are developing may prove to be harmful to our traditional and cultural practices. Ladies and gentlemen, our cultures are dying. Our languages are being replaced for international tongues, and our traditional practices have been diluted. And although the financial gains of development may prove to be attractive, they may also prove to be harmful to our traditional practices. Now, I never understood the severity of this issue until early last year when I heard the phrase, "The loss of our culture is a small price that we must be willing to pay in order to become like the first world nations of the world." And when I heard this phrase, I said, "Otio, guy." I was sitting in my humanities classroom and my friends and I were disputing globalization and development as a driving force to the death of African cultures. And as the conversation continued to progress and move on, that same phrase continued to linger in the walls of my mind. Now, this was also the first time the term carrier of culture popped up into my mind, but I never thought much of it at the time. Now, fast forward a couple of months, I'm sitting with my aunt and uncle, and I was telling them about a project that I wanted to start up. And the goal of this project was to create a platform in the form of a short documentary that would promote the urban art and culture in Nairobi and would feature various artists from within the city. Imminent Creators is the name that I gave to the project, which is honestly just a fancy way of saying upcoming artists. And now that I had a name and a goal to the project, I wanted to have a sort of catchphrase or a motto that would go alongside it. And after pondering and pondering for days on end, that same phrase popped up in my mind: carrier of culture. Now, it was only 2 months after I started up this project that I was able to come up with a definition for the term carrier of culture. So a carrier of culture is a person who acknowledges the fact that African traditions are in fact dying out, but actively takes steps and strides towards preserving these cultures. I'm sure we are all aware that Africa is the leading chief when it comes to everything in the expressive arts, the culinary arts, and fashion. However, we've begun abandoning our ways and adopting the ways of the West. Children these days grow up not being able to speak their mother tongue, and I am a culprit of this. We have abandoned our music and our sense of rhythm, and we've adopted the pop sounds of the West, and we've lost our taste for cultural food. Now, don't get me wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong with appreciating other forms of music and other styles of food. However, the problem does arise when we are unable to show that same form of appreciation to ourselves and our own cultures. Africa is in dire need of us to be her carriers of culture. It is up to us to preserve these traditions that have been passed down from generation to generation and ensure that we will not be held responsible for the death of Mama Africa's cultures. I'd like you to imagine an Africa without the Afro beats that we love to sway to. No Burna, no Mr. Easy, and yes, no Tiwa Savage. I'd like you to imagine being called down to the dinner table and not finding it filled with chapati and chicken and pilau. I'd like you to imagine an Africa without the fundamental rituals and traditions that uphold the continent itself. No extravagant weddings of the Ndebele people of Southern Africa, where the wedding dresses literally put Western ones to shame. And no lip plates of the Mursi people of Ethiopia that redefine the beauty standards of our continent. No circumcision practices of boys in Eastern African communities who are ready to take the step towards becoming men in societies. What would become of our Africa, and who would we become as Africans? Now, I know you're probably sitting in your seat saying, okay, the cultures are dying, but what can I personally do about this? Well, what if I told you that being a carrier of culture is as easy as A, B, C? Allow me to elaborate. Now, A stands for advocate. To be a carrier of culture, we have to stand up and support everything good that is African. The Cambridge Dictionary defines the term advocate as publicly suggesting or supporting an idea, and that is exactly what we must do. Wanuri Kahio is a Kenyan film director, producer, and author, and she has received various awards and nominations for her works in films such as Pumzi and Rafiki. In addition to this, she is a visual artist and creates art that is strictly African and portrays us in the ways that we wish to be viewed by the rest of the world. The reason I admire Wanuri so much is because of how proud she is of her fashion. No matter the event, Wanuri will always be found wearing something that is reflective of where she comes from. Whether it's a Maasai bead necklace or anything else, she is proud of who she represents. Now, like Wanuri, I too have tried to do my part to stand up and advocate for African art. Last year, I started the Cheza dance crew, which is an Afro dance enrichment that aims to allow people to connect and embrace their African roots. Now, since then, over 24 people have gotten the opportunity to do so. And although these numbers may be small, it's the smaller steps that we take that actually count. To be a carrier of culture, we must strive to be confident of where we come from and who we represent. So the next time you go out into that market, I'd like you to buy that dashiki that's up on the shelf, or wear that aso-oke fabric that is commonly worn and woven by the Yoruba people of Western Africa, or the kitenge that is commonly seen in Eastern African communities. Learn your mother tongue and speak it with confidence, for that is what makes you unique from the rest of the world. Always keep your head held high and make sure that kente head wrap does not fall to the ground. Look for these various avenues that will allow you to express and embrace your culture. Now, moving on to B. B stands for believe. To be a carrier of culture, we must believe and have faith in our local industries. Whether it's film, food, or business, we must be supportive of what we have here at home. Now, the other day I was having a conversation with my best friend, and we both agreed that we wanted to have a Nigerian movie marathon. And the reason for this was simple. We wanted to see who the next person to be turned into a dog or a rat would be, and we wanted to know and see when that annoying sound would make its ultimate comeback, signifying that the witch was about to arrive. But much deeper than this, we understood the need to support the local industries and film industries specifically of our continent. We wanted to bring forth the question of why we prefer to watch Hollywood films and not Nollywood in Western Africa or Wakaliwood in Uganda. We wanted to bring forward the question of why we prefer to watch films starring Angelina Jolie and not one starring Ramsey Noah, for example. And ultimately, we wanted to find out who killed Captain Alex. It is important to remember that to believe is to know and appreciate that something is good and true. It is to acknowledge the fact that what is on offer is useful and of a good quality. And I believe that the only way we can be able to attain world-class standards in our own industries is if we become the primary consumers. The Proudly South African campaign is one that ran a few years back, and what this involved was the placing of a small logo on every South African brand and service. And by doing this, the citizens of South Africa itself were involved in the boosting of the country's potential and beauty. And why I believe this movement was so phenomenal was because the citizens themselves were involved. Such campaigns remind us that there is power in belief, support, and positivity. The song When You Believe by Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey is testament of this because it reminds us that there can be miracles when we believe. So let us begin to see the good in our industries. Let us appreciate and join movements that will allow us to support and embrace our local businesses. Let us have faith in ourselves and what we are capable of doing, because Africa has so much room for growth and potential. Let us invest this energy into our local industries, because in doing so, we will create a vision for ourselves, and we will create the strength of will to tap into our full potential as a continent. By doing so, we will become carriers of culture. Now, before I move on to the next point that I want to give, I'd like us to do a small activity together. Over on the screen, I'm going to project the works of a few artists that I tend to admire, and I'd like you to shout out the name of the artist that made the piece. That's right, that's Van Gogh, Da Vinci. So it's interesting how when the works of international artists who are dead were projected onto the screen, we were almost instantaneously able to say who had created those pieces. But when the works of contemporary African artists who are still alive were projected onto the screen, we fell silent. Now, I was analyzing the works of Sherry Samba and Lionel Smith, who are two of my favorite contemporary African artists. And by appreciating their work, I was able to find the last ingredient that needs to be taken to become a carrier of culture. And this is to create. We must create pieces that are reflective and that portray the African continent as we wish it to be viewed by the rest of the world. I believe that the arts are powerful tools as they are able to change our mindsets and viewpoints. Quite recently, the art that is being produced from Africa has had to meet a specific agenda. Whether it's to raise awareness about HIV and AIDS in the African continent, or to raise funds to ensure that a small boy in Zimbabwe will be able to go to school. And although these are all effective and commendable ways of raising awareness about such important issues, this cannot be the only art that is being produced from our continent. We must strive to have a balance between art that is important and has to meet a specific agenda, and between art that can be made for art's sake. Like Lionel Smith and Sherry Samba, we must create pieces and dances and songs that will be able to change the perceptions the Western world has set for Africa. And if the arts are not your thing, then feel free to invest that same energy into your business or into your fashion, into your everyday 9-to-5 job, and in your everyday life. As I mentioned before, there is power in creation, and together we can be able to set a different, more positive image of the African continent if we follow those 3 simple steps: advocate, believe, and create. I have a vision that one day my child will be able to sit in the back of my car the way I did in my mother's 10 years back and have the same eye-opening moment that I did. I have a vision of the Africa that our children will grow up in, one where speaking your mother tongue will become the norm and where wearing traditional clothes will be the norm as well. I have a vision that we will be able to support international industries as much as we support our own, and that we will develop in ways that will enhance and embrace our cultures. It is my hope that we will be looking something similar to Wakanda. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Caelan Mwiti, and I am a carrier of culture. Thank you.